Welcome to the webinar. I am so grateful to have everybody with us today. I am Catherine Johns, and thank you for joining us. And welcome to the Greensboro History Museum's March webinar series, New in Town, Immigration and Refugees in Guilford County. My name is Catherine Johns. I am the tour coordinator and resource specialist for the education department at the Greensboro History Museum. During the March webinar, we will be joined by members of UNC Greensboro Center for New North Carolinians. Today's conversation is made possible in part by the Greensboro History Museum Guild, the City of Greensboro, and the Libraries Department. Any views, findings, or recommendations expressed in today's program do not necessarily reflect those aforementioned entities. We are also extremely pleased to have our guest audience join us. If you'll take the time to look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A icon. By selecting this option, you can type in questions for our panelists. Once you've typed in the question, hit the enter button on your keyboard to submit it. We reserved the latter part of our program to field questions today. But that does not mean that you can't put questions in during the presentation if something pops into your mind. This evening, we welcome our panelists for today's webinar, which will also be featured as an archive in our History Notes podcast section at a later date. At your convenience, please visit www.greensborohistory.org and select the tab Discover and Learn to hear the podcast when available. We also will be premiering this webinar tomorrow, March 17th, on the Greensboro History Museum YouTube page at 5:30 p.m. So if you want to rewatch or you want to send this to someone else, the recording will be there. Today's presenter is Natacha Nikokeza, originally from Burundi, East Africa. She came to the US 12 years ago, as she was saying. She's been working with refugees and immigrants as a volunteer since she arrived, but has been working with them professionally since graduating from Wake Forest with a master's degree of law in 2015. She has worked with World Relief for 2 years before joining CNNC in June of 2017. We are so happy to have Miss Nikokeza here today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Yes, I am so thrilled to be here and to share the refugee journey, which is my journey because my family and I came to the US as refugees. And so a little bit about me, other than what Catherine shared, is that I am the senior program coordinator for the community centers and with the Center for New North Carolinians. So the Center for New North Carolinians, as a center, we are under UNCG and has been in existence for 20 years. And we provide a lot of programs, and I'm going to talk about specifically the programs that we provide for refugees and immigrants from the community centers. So the community centers are located in the apartment complexes where they live, and so they walk to the center to get services. We provide services for adults, and those, some of them are employment services, case management. We provide ESOL classes, citizenship classes, parenting classes, you name it. We also provide services to youth, and these services are primarily education services. So we provide tutoring, after school program for the kids. They come from school straight to the community centers to get help with homework. And so you can understand that we are not able to do all of this work without the great help of volunteers, interns, and AmeriCorps members. So those are a few ways that people can get involved with our program. So I am going to get into the refugee journey by sharing the slides. Okay. All right, so I will start with the definition of a refugee. So refugees are people who have fled war, violence, conflict, or persecution and have crossed an international border to find safety in another country. They often have fled their countries with just closed on their backs, leaving behind homes, possessions, jobs, and loved ones. So I also wanted to bring to your attention the refugee definition under the United States law, which is someone who is located outside of the United States, is of special humanitarian concern to the United States, demonstrate that they were persecuted or fear persecution due to race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, is not formally resettled in another country. So to understand that if someone has been resettled in another country, they cannot come to the US and say, hey, I need to resettle here. That is not possible. And it is someone who is admissible to the United States, because not everyone is admissible to come as refugees. And a refugee does not include anyone who ordered, incited, assisted, or otherwise participated in the persecution of any person on account of race, religion, nationality, membership, etc. So refugees leave, before they resettle in a country, they either live in refugees camps or they live in urban setting. So I'm going to talk about refugee camps.
Can people apply for refugee status in their own countries?
Good question. No, they are not able to apply for refugee status in their own countries because the persecution that we are talking about can be from their own government persecuting them. So their own government, if it's the one persecuting them, will not assign that refugee status to the people. They will have to leave their own country to go to a country of asylum, where then they will establish, they will meet with UNHCR and United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and then only then they can apply for asylum and be granted a refugee status.
Oh, thank you. That really clarifies the process.
Thanks. So refugee camps are temporarily facilities built to provide immediate protection, assistance to people who have been forced to flee due to conflict, violence, or persecution. While camps are not intended to provide permanent sustainable solutions, they offer shelter, medical treatment, food, or other basic service during emergencies. So this is to say that refugee camps are not supposed to be for a long period of time. They are supposed to be for a short period of time, but we are going to see that, it ended up not being the case. Some refugees actually get to a resettlement country after they have been in a refugee camp for 20 years, 30 years or more. There are refugee camps all over the world. So many of these camps were built quickly to serve the immediate needs of those forced to flee, but have grown to host hundreds of thousands of displaced people. Refugee hosting countries do not allow refugees to work legally. Unfortunately, that's the case. In many countries, the only option is either to work for a small incentive with NGOs based in the camp, or to work illegally with no rights and often in bad conditions. So in some camps, refugees set up their own businesses. Those without a job or without relatives and friends who send remittances have to sell parts of their food rations to get cash, as support does not usually provide cash. So you can imagine how difficult it can be for refugees living in camps, or refugees living anywhere, because they are not able to work in these countries that are hosting them. They are not able to work simply because the nationals of those countries also need to work. So, you know, you understand that the priority is given to people from those countries to be able to work, and refugees are supposed to be taken care of by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and those NGOs that are in the refugee camps. But what they provide is really very limited.
Mm.
So this is a picture of a classroom in a refugee camp that I visited in December of 2019 with the mayor of Greensboro, who is here in a blue dress. And we went with a family that had lost 5 kids in an apartment fire. I don't know if you guys are aware of that.
Yes.
But yeah, there was this family that lost all their 5 kids. And the mayor of Greensboro really wanted to go and visit the camp, understand the kind of life refugees live before they come to the US, but also really to understand the needs that refugees have when they come to the US so that we can be more prepared. And this here is my son, who was 14 then and is 15 now, my middle son. He wanted to come with me because usually take them to the community centers to volunteer. And he always asked me, like, what is a refugee camp? Like, you know, how is life there? So because of all these questions, I was like, okay, let's go together and you are going to find out. So he was thrilled, but at the same time, he was very sad to see that, you know, although we took a few things, you know, like school supplies and clothes and shoes and stuff like that, but seeing, you know, the poverty that people live in, you know, how little they have, but how happy they are. It was just something that he is still talking about and that changed completely his life. So this classroom actually hosts more than 100 kids. And, you know, kids are sitting on the floor on, you know, in this tiny classroom. They walk miles to go to school, and sometimes they go to school hungry. And so all of these small details were, you know, some of the details that really got our mayor and the other folks that we went with really to think about the kind of, you know, life that our refugee population live before they come to the US, and really got them to understand the kind of support that they need, you know, when they come to the US.
Absolutely.
Urban refugees. An urban refugee is a refugee who decided or was obliged to settle in an urban area rather than in a refugee camp in the country or territory where the person fled to. More than 60% of the world refugee population and 80% of internally displaced persons under UNHCR mandate live in urban areas. So every time that you see refugees here, don't assume that they came from a refugee camp, because you see that the percentage actually of refugees coming from urban areas is high. So reasons for living in an urban settings rather than in a refugee camps could be specific to like medical needs, or people wanting to achieve like higher education, just like people wanting to be able to get things that they are not able to get in refugee camps, because we saw how limited the resources in refugee camps are, and people have to walk miles and miles to get to the hospital, miles and miles to get to school. So everything is really like limited.
Yes.
So this is to show you like how many refugees and where they came from in the fiscal year 2018. So you can see that the majority of refugees that came to the US came from DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
And I believe that is where the family with the 5 children came from as well. Was that the refugee camp that you were in the photos?
So we visited a refugee camp, one refugee camp that is in Uganda. And this is specifically the refugee camp where that family came from. But there are a lot of refugee camps in Uganda, itself. And refugees, like we talked about, that are in those camps came from other places other than Uganda, because they went to Uganda to get asylum, but they are not from Uganda.
Yes.
So the family that we're talking about is from DRC and was in that resettlement in that refugee camp for many years. Yeah. So we have people from Burma that came in 2018, Ukraine, Bhutan, Eritrea, and all of these other countries that you see.
Mm-hmm.
All right, switching to resettlement, unless you have a question?
I do. I was going to ask, so we were talking about refugees. What is the difference between a refugee and an immigrant exactly?
Good question. So a refugee, we talked about what they have to do. So they have to leave their country, flee to a country that will host them. And then from there, they will work with United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to establish their refugee status. That is actually a status. Once they have that paper that says you are a refugee, it's a new ID for them. It's an ID that they use in that country, and it's also that initial paperwork that they will use to get to the resettlement country. Okay, so they leave their country, they go to an asylum country, and then they eventually get to a resettlement country. Okay, that is what they do, refugees. An immigrant is any person who is in a foreign country, regardless of their status, regardless of how they got there, because there are so many ways of being in the United States, because we're talking about United States.
Yes.
So there are different types of visa that people get. And so all of these people, including refugees, they are called immigrants because they are foreigners to this country. They came somehow. So it's an umbrella. Immigrants, it's this big umbrella that has all these types of people with different types of legal status or no status at all. They're called immigrants.
Okay.
So all refugees are immigrants, but not all immigrants are refugees. Does that make sense?
Yes. Big umbrella.
Yes. All right. So resettlement is the transfer of refugees from an asylum country to another state that has agreed to admit them and ultimately grant them permanent residence. UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee, is mandated by its statute and the UN General Assembly resolutions to undertake resettlement as one of the 3 durable solutions. So the other 2 are voluntary return or local integration. Resettlement is unique in that it is the only durable solution that involves the relocation of refugees from an asylum country to a third country. So I wanted to make sure that, everyone understand what I just read here. So resettlement is the only movement that allows people who fled from their original country to a host country to actually move from that host country to a resettlement country. Okay, so the other 2 ways that people ended up living after they fled is to either return back to where they came from if, situations that were pushing them to flee are maybe no longer there or resolved, or they stay. Local integration, they either stay in the country of host, or sometimes they are in the same country that is really like pushing them away, but somehow under the umbrella of the UN. So this actually happened with Syrians who were not able to leave, but were right there protected.
Yes.
But that protection, you can imagine, it's not really like, a protection.
Very flimsy.
Exactly, exactly. So resettlement is also the only way for refugees to get a citizenship of the country that accept them, like the third country that we are talking about. So the host country cannot provide, permanent residency for refugees. We talked about they are not even able to, allow them to work legally there. So they are supposed to stay there for a short period of time, but because of a lot of reasons, political reasons, plus you see here highlighted that only 1% of refugees all over the world get resettled. So you understand that refugees ended up staying in host countries for so many years, waiting for that turn to come so that they can move to a resettlement country.
That's an incredible statistic. Oh.
Yeah. So resettlement in the US, the number of refugees accepted to the United States each year is set by the president in consultation with Congress, and that must occur before October 1st of each year. Less than 1% of the total number of displaced people in the world has been resettled to one of the 37 resettlement countries. And some of them are the UK, Germany, Canada, and others. The United States conduct a rigorous vetting process to determine whether to accept refugees for resettlement. So the entire process takes 2 years or 20 or 30 or more. So when you hear people talk about vetting, people talking about, refugees just come, like that, it's not the case. The vetting system, especially for the US, takes a long time. So they really take the time to interview and run background checks like a million times. So I went through that, and I can tell you sometimes you just feel like your head is spinning because
oh my gosh,
it's a long process.
Oh, background checks are not fun to begin with, but have to do it with your life on the line. That is something else.
Yeah, like having to repeat your story constantly, having to just like have that look that says, are you sure? Like, really? What you're talking about? Really? Yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun. All right, so these are the 6 steps that are used by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, to get a refugee ready to travel, okay? So the first step is UNHCR identifies refugees who will need resettlement based on their vulnerability or specific needs. UNHCR assesses each individual case, gathers all the background information, and submit the case to be considered for resettlement. Resettlement support centers and US government intelligence agencies run background checks and security clearance processes. The Department of Homeland Security conducts face-to-face interviews to determine whether the application qualifies for resettlement. The step number 5 is the medical screening. So pre-approved applicants go through medical screening to ensure they do not have tuberculosis or other communicable diseases. Approved applicants are assigned to local NGOs that assist them upon arrival. So these NGOs help refugees integrate and become economically self-sufficient in their new US community. So traveling to the US. So after all these steps, a family or an individual is ready to travel. So they went through tons of interviews, background checks, medical screening. Now they are ready to travel. And so they are given something they call cultural orientation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really like to say, hey, so you're going to this new country. These are things that you need to know. This is how your apartment will look like. This is who you will be greeted with at the airport. You know, you will need to take your kids to school. You will have to start taking ESL classes. You know, this is the way people travel to the US. All of the things that you can think about can be done in a week or 2 hours. So it's not always the same way that people prepare themselves to travel. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they are told like a week prior, and they have that time to say their goodbyes, you know, to buy a few things to take with them. But sometimes it's like overnight, you are traveling tomorrow. And so they have no time to do anything really, you know. Some of them, we talked about being in urban settings. So you are renting an apartment, you have all this furniture that you wanted to give to someone or that you wanted to sell, and you have no time for that. It's like, get ready, you are leaving.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So if you're lucky, you are given that week, and so you take it and you use it. So refugees traveling to the United States are issued loans by the International Organization for Migration, IOM, to pay for the cost of their transportation from overseas to the US. So resettlement to the US resettlement sites and for various medical screening costs. So the funds to cover transportation are provided to IOM by the State Department Bureau for Population, Migration, and Refugees. The travel loan is an interest-free loan, which refugees generally begin to pay back after they have been in the US for 6 months. It is a loan. Mm-hmm. So there is that pressure to start working immediately so that you can start paying this loan, but also you need to start working immediately because of the self-sufficiency that is behind resettlement and how much funding is given to a resettlement agency to work with the family. So we're going to see that in the next few slides. Wow. A promissory note is signed by every refugee 18 years old and older prior to arrival in the US. This note confirms the refugees' agreement to make regular monthly payments to the sponsoring agency. These payments are used to reimburse the US government for the funds it provided to IOM for refugee transportation.
So Natacha, you have taken us through step by step, kind of generically what a refugee is going to go through, an overview, but you have your own specialized experience of it. Do you feel comfortable sharing with us what your experience was like?
Yes. So our family left quickly Burundi because of the unrest that was happening, and we had to leave very short, like in a very short period of time. Also, thinking that our process was going to take just a few months because of the way we left, and because of how easy it was for us to prove what we were saying, reasons that made us leave the country,
Yes.
because everything was in the news. So it was just a matter of like, you Google or you call someone, you pick up a phone, you call someone in Burundi, and our story was verifiable like that. But no, it took us 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, it took us 2 years. We did not live in a refugee camp. We left Burundi, with a little bit of money, but you can imagine that, no matter how much money you have, if you have to rent and eat and, take care of kids and all of that, like put them to school, after we realized that, no, it was not a month, it was not 2 months, it was more than that. And we had no idea for how long we were going to stay. So we kind of like established life there, and put kids to school, and then started looking for a job. But no, there is no job available for you, because any type of job that we thought we could do, they then asked us, why do you think you are better than a Kenyan? Because we were in Kenya.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was that, reality, but we were so fortunate because we had family members back in Burundi that could help us. But also my husband was able to travel back and forth to Rwanda and other countries, and could do some little jobs here and there, to take care of the family. And then after 2 years, here we are in Greensboro, and we are greeted by one of the resettlement agencies. We are given an apartment, and they say, okay, here you are. Now you're on your own. You have to start working immediately. You guys are educated. You speak English, so good luck.
Oh.
And so we're like, oh, okay. Yeah. And so, yeah, we really, we were fortunate because we had that support from people that we met. And again, I think like we were very fortunate to be able to speak English and understand English, even though I'm going to share that with you guys that no, the first few months I did not want to leave the house because of how uncomfortable I was, not understanding the American accent, being asked to repeat every time I say something. So I was like, okay, I am gonna go home and stay home, and that's it. But then at some point I was like, no, come on, no, you are not gonna stay home. You need to get out there and find a job and work. And I did, and before you are doing it, before you are working, before you actually find purpose to continue to do it and do even more, because then you find that there are people who actually are struggling, and so you realize what you have that you can actually use to help others. And so that pushes and pushes. It really pushed me to get uncomfortable so that someone else can actually get something, get some services and advocate for people and things like that.
Have you found a lot of the refugees that you're working with have a similar reaction when they first get here, that they don't want to leave their house?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that actually led me to start a group. It's a support group of women that I started before 2014, but it really became I will say official in 2014. because I started it just for me because of how lonely I felt. And then, it started by just me visiting other refugee families and just like hanging out with them. And then as I was talking to them, I really realized that no, I was not alone feeling this way. And I felt like, it was my calling to actually do something about it. Just really at the beginning for selfish reasons. It was just serving me more than it was serving anyone else. But, from talking to people and seeing how lonely they felt, I was like, why don't we do something about that? So we created this group, and we were later on joined by university professors from UNCG, A&T, our the Center for New North Carolinians director then, Holly Sinkwitz, and a professor from UNC Chapel Hill. And these were women from here, but who felt like they had that connection and they could bring something to these women who really could learn so much from them. But at the same time, this group of women from the US felt like they could learn something from these other women who were new to the US. So this group, like I said, started in 2014, and that was even before I started at CNNC, because I joined CNNC in 2017. But it has been amazing just to watch how these women will look forward to our meetings, will just, put on their outfit. We will cook and eat and share meals and dance. So it went from people feeling like they could not even leave their own apartment because of how lonely and the trauma that, these women went through, to dancing. You will see, like, you could see transformation right there. And it was just amazing. So, that is what even like keeps me motivated to continue with the group. Is the group is still there, we're still meeting monthly. We went from meeting every week to meeting monthly, and then we stopped with COVID, of course. But we were still able to kind of like check in, on the phone and using WhatsApp groups. I don't know if you guys are, aware of what that is, but it's an app that people download on their phones to stay connected with their family members all over the world. And so that's what we use to communicate and to share information.
I think did it get taken over by Facebook?
It is now somehow connected to Facebook, but we are still there.
Still works. Still works fine.
Yeah. As long as they allow us to use it, we're fine. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
This picture is wanted to share and show you how refugees travel to resettlement country. They travel with these bags that you see. It has IOM written on it, and it contains documents that are really like everything that refugees will need to start over in a resettlement country. So it's like an ID. It has medical documents. It has this document that has everyone's picture, name, date of birth. And that is really the beginning of people getting their Social Security cards. Without those documents, they're lost completely.
Ooh.
So when they leave the host country, they are told, you can lose everything else, but make sure that this bag you keep, okay? So really, it doesn't matter what, how, like what else they have and how valuable they are. This bag is more valuable than anything else that they have. Because without it, they can prove who they are. They can start this process. They are really stuck.
Were you
if you see refugees at, at the airport or in an airplane with this bag, know that, they are traveling, and yeah. And remember all this journey that they take to get here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Catherine?
I was going to ask you, were you all afraid of them being lost? The bag?
Not really, because this bag, you hold it close to you, when you are traveling. So really, like, understanding how important it is, you make sure that everything else can go in suits, but this one will stay with you. You are holding it on you. You are holding it. It stays on your laps. Whatever you want to do, you do, just to make sure that you keep it safely. Yeah,
it's like having one of those handcuffed briefcases with you.
Telling you. Yep.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yep. All right. So refugees in the U.S. After a refugee arrives in the U.S., they are eligible for food stamps, medical insurance, employment authorization, and cash assistance. So you can see that refugees, when they arrive to the U.S., they have the benefits of like a U.S. citizen. They have food stamps, they have Medicaid, they have everything that they need to start life here. Which is not the case for the other types of immigrants that we talked about, who are coming to actually establish their asylum here in the US. So they skip the step of establishing this asylum in a host country, which is what refugees do before they come. So other immigrants who are here on the other different types of visa, they are a step behind refugees, if that makes sense. Yes. They are establishing reasons why they can be granted asylum here in the US, while refugees did that already in another country they fled to. Yeah.
Important building block.
So refugees must apply for a green card 1 year after they come to the US, and they are able to apply for citizenship after they have been in the US for 5 years. So this is what we talked about, which is not anything that refugees who are not in a resettlement country are able to get. Okay, so being able to have a citizenship of a country is everything, and it's worth all this time that refugees spend working on their asylum cases.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oof.
So if you are a refugee in the United States and want your family members to who are abroad to come to the US, there is this form that you have to fill out, and so the family members can be like your spouse or unmarried children if they are under 21. So, and refugees have to file this form within the 2 years after arrival. And this is something that's covered during cultural orientation that people are given as soon as they come to the US, so that they use that time wisely.
Okay.
Resettlement program. So refugees selected for resettlement through US refugee admission program are eligible for reception and placement assistance, R&P, unlike asylees who arrive in the United States on their own. So this is what I was saying, that resettlement agencies, they pick refugees up from the airport and they start working with them immediately. So they have apartments ready for them. They help them apply for, Social Security, food stamp, and all of the things that they need. And this R&P assistance or case management lasts for only 3 months. So each refugee approved for admission to the United States is sponsored by a nonprofit resettlement agency participating in the R&P program under a cooperative agreement with the Department of State. The R&P program provides resettlement agencies a one-time payment per refugee. So $1,100 for one individual is what they are given to be used for 3 months. So if it's a family of 5, it's 1,100 times 5. But if it's an individual, just one person, this is how much they receive. And this is supposed to cover expenses related to food, clothes, furniture that people find in their apartments, everything that you can think of that people need to start over comes from this much money, and this much money is supposed to last 3 months. So reason why there is this pressure for refugees to start working immediately, because after this money is gone, it's gone. And so they have to start paying rent, they have to start paying for utilities and all the bills, not to forget the IOM money, the travel loan that they were given that they have to start paying after 6 months. So really there is a pressure for refugees to not think about, learning ESL or doing anything other than working and taking the first job that's available so that they can provide for their families after 3 months. So there are 2 resettlement agencies in Greensboro, Church Road Service and African Services Coalition. Upon arrival in the United States, all refugees are met by someone from a local resettlement affiliated or a member of the family member or a friend. They are taken to their initial housing, which has essential furnishing, appropriate food, and other necessities. The resettlement agencies assist refugees with enrolling in employment services, registering youth for school, applying for Social Security cards, and connecting them with necessary social or language services. Refugees receive employment authorization upon arrival and are encouraged to become employed as soon as possible. So the R&P program is limited to the first 3 months after arrival. So I covered all of this. So resettlement agencies really can provide case management services for only 3 months. But I don't know if you remember the services that I mentioned that we provide at the community centers for refugees and immigrants. We do not actually have a time cap to provide services to our clients. If a refugee family has been in the US for 10 years, and they need our services, we provide services. So we do not receive a federal government money that will dictate, what we do and for how long and all of that, which is really neat and help us actually be able to be flexible in the services that we provide. And I find that very fascinating because I talked about how quick everything is done after refugees arrive in the US. And so even if education and workshops are given for refugees to understand what they're supposed to expect in a new country, you can imagine how much they understand and are able to take in because they're still very new and they have not experienced some of those things that are covered. It's really after they have been in the country for many years that they start to really understand and sometimes get in trouble. And then as they get that support from the community and support from our services, it's really when they get it. And so that's why I think that the services that we provide are very important, because they come in when refugees are really in need of services because they don't have anywhere else to get services from. And so us being there to kind of like accompany them throughout the process, showing them, but at the same time being there to support them, I feel like it's everything, you know. And you know, if you talk to them, they will tell you that clients that live in these apartment complexes where we have community centers or that live nearby are very fortunate compared to definitely folks who live far away, because we don't have community centers everywhere in Greensboro. So we are only in 3 locations, but I feel like the work that we do is very important to help families as they, you know, as they settle in, as you know, they get to really understand what's going on. And so as being there to help them throughout the process, it's very important.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so if folks are, you know, wanting to get involved, this is, you know, the websites of resettlement agencies, but at the same time, here we are, learn more about who we are, and definitely reach out to me or to anyone that you see on our website who is doing a great job, and you want to connect with them, feel free to look around and decide, you know, what you want to do. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
Natacha, you have a lot of questions that people have. So the first one, somebody asked us right after your introduction. They were wondering what exactly your Master of Law was in. What is your specialty?
It was, so like the Masters of Law covered like a whole range, but it really, I narrowed it down by really taking the time to research and all of that. Immigration was what I really went for and what I wrote a paper on, because I mean, you know, I felt like if I don't do that, then what will I do? So I really needed to get to a next level, you know, because I lived it. I also wanted to be, you know, to understand what else goes into it, you know, other than just like the lived experience. I wanted to be able to provide services by really understanding what else is out there. And reason why I ended up doing my internship with UNHCR.
So we have about 5 more. There are 5 more questions from the audience. A lot of questions. First, from Betsy Harrington, does the U.S. immigration system play any part in designating someone as a refugee, or are those decisions made in the host country?
No, actually, if you look at the process, everything the US is behind, okay? So the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee works very closely with countries that take in refugees. So they do everything with the countries that ended up taking these refugees in, because they have to follow the laws in those countries. And so the US has a huge part in the process, in the vetting system, in really making sure that people who will come to the US are the people that they know and took the time to say, these are good people, you know, to bring to the US.
All right. Next, we have from Jasmine Harris. What are some ways communities can better support refugees and immigrants with adjusting to foreign cultures? Are more support groups needed? Can ESOL classes help make those connections?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so glad that, you know, folks are feeling like they can do something, because, you know, where I come from, and actually I heard this from so many people, it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village for someone who is new to feel welcome and to feel part of the society, part of the community. So if people are open to starting that conversation with a new neighbor, and say, hey, this is my name and this is what I do. How can I help you? Just like opening up and starting that conversation, you will be surprised to see how much you will learn, because you started that conversation and you opened up your heart to take in as you are giving that service. So, transportation, ESOL, checking in to see if a child needs help with homework is very important. You can imagine for refugee immigrant parents who are here and do not speak English, how difficult it is for them to not be able to help their kids with homework, when all of the things that they went through, all the trauma, all the difficulties of the journey was so that their kids can actually get somewhere and live a different life than the parents did. So it's a lot that people can do, but it also can start with something small as talking to someone.
In connection to that, we actually had another question that kind of goes hand in hand. Inez, and I'm so sorry if I said your name wrong. Inez Elliott is asking, how can people get connected with the newcomers school?
Oh, that's a good question. So the newcomer school, go to their website. Before COVID, they were taking volunteers. They were taking interns. I know that it was very helpful to have folks in and ready to help. But I don't know, with COVID, everything, it's just like, it's been a mess. But, reach out to them. I know Angel Katona is the school social worker, and she's amazing. I know that she will be happy to connect you in any way.
Absolutely. I want to ask the next one from Inez as well, which is, can these slides be sent to the participants? That is completely up to Natacha if she wants to share these slides. Apparently people want to revisit the slides that you've written, Natacha. you gave an extremely informative presentation. I know I just learned every single slide was something I just learned completely new. So
I mean, I don't see a problem. I don't see a problem.
What we can do is you can send a email to me, because I have the PowerPoint presentation, and I can send a PDF to you of it. I'm going to type my email in to the chat here. Congratulations, Natacha. That is the first time that has been asked on our webinar, was for the presentation to be essentially transcribed to the rest of the panelists. Very good. So that is my email. Feel free to email me that is my email in the chat, catherine.johns@greensboro-nc.gov. If you would like a copy of the slides, I can email it to you if you shoot me an email. So that is going to take care of two of those. And then our last one, which is a very important question. I actually had this question myself, so thank you, Joan Hudson, which is, are there consequences if they are unable to repay the loan?
Good question. So, IOM is very flexible and really gives people time if they are not able to start immediately. But there is that promissory note that people sign that says, hey, you will need to do this. But also there is that conscience that tells you, if you do this, some other people will be able to come in. And it really says you are giving this opportunity to come, to travel. You did not have to pay anything, but if you do your part, other people, this is actually something that is covered during cultural orientation, where they tell people you have to pay so that other people can come. And if you have left family members in this country that was hosting, and they are not able to come in, you will feel guilty. So there is that conscience, but there's also this promissory note that you sign saying that you will pay. So you know, it might take longer, but you will need to pay. So people have to pay.
No matter what, pretty much.
Yeah, so actually, like, consequences that I can think of might be if they are getting ready to become citizens, that might come back and you know, kind of like hurt them, because they applied to become citizens after they have been in the country for 5 years. And so if they have not started, or you know, have made very few payments, that can be something that they look at and say, hey, you are not ready to become a citizen. And so, you know, people don't want to be in that position.
Okay, so thank you so much, Natacha. You have done an amazing job. Needless to say. Again, I have just put my email in the chat there. So if you are interested, please shoot me an email, and that way I can transform this into a PDF and give it to you if you are interested in these slides. For right now, though, I just want to thank you so much, Natacha. You have been an incredible guest. I know I have learned so much, and I am going to guess, just by the sheer amount of people who are asking for these slides now, that a lot of others have as well. So for anybody who is interested, we are going to end our wonderful webinars on immigration on Tuesday, March 30th, with some of Miss Nikokeza's other compatriots from the Center for New North Carolinians. It will be at 6 p.m. It is, of course, free, as are all of the Greensboro History Museum's education webinars. This particular one will be on immigrant and refugee legal issues with Miss Nikokeza. You might be asked to come back for, considering your degree. For anybody who is
you will have someone who is perfect for that.
Perfect. Oh, I'm so excited. For anybody who is interested in registering, please go to www.greensborohistory.org. Again,